Look at the shape of these forts. From above, they don't look like ordinary military defenses. They look engineered, measured, placed with intent, sharp angles, perfect symmetry, and in some cases, strange alignments that seem to connect one structure to another across vast distances. What if star forts were never just fortresses? What if they were part of a larger system? A forgotten energy network hidden in plain sight? The official story is simple. Star forts were designed in the age of cannons. Their angled walls were built to resist artillery. Their geometry gave defenders better lines of fire and reduced blind spots. That explanation makes sense on paper, but it does not explain why so many of them appear across different countries, why some sit in places that seem strategically odd, and why their layouts often feel too precise to be purely improvised. The more you compare them, the more they look less like isolated forts and more like pieces of a much larger pattern. Across Europe, the Americas, and parts of Asia, star forts appear with repeated geometric logic. Not random, not rough, not improvised. They often sit near waterways, old roads, elevated ground, or city edges. Some are deeply embedded in the urban plan. Others stand alone in fields or coastlines, as if they were placed for a purpose no modern map fully explains. And this is where alternative researchers ask a different question. If these structures were only military, why do they seem to align so neatly with one another? Why do some suggest the layout of a network rather than individual fortresses? This is where the energy grid theory begins. Supporters of the idea argue that the sharp angles of star forts, their symmetry, and their distribution across the landscape suggest more than defense. They believe these structures may have captured, directed, or amplified some form of energy, whether electrical, atmospheric, resonant, or geophysical. They point to the fact that many old-world structures share geometric precision. Forts, cathedrals, towers, domes, and monuments all appear to obey a visual logic of alignment. To believers, star forts were not random defensive works. They were nodes, points on a larger grid. Why does this theory keep returning? Because the forts themselves are hard to explain away emotionally. They look too deliberate, too mathematical, too globally repeated. Even if the military explanation is correct for many of them, the scale and consistency leave room for suspicion. Why build so many with the same radical shape? Why in so many places? Why do some sit in positions that seem to matter more for landscape than warfare? Once people start asking those questions, the energy grid idea becomes difficult to dismiss completely, not because it is proven, but because the forts are visually strange enough to invite the question. If star forts were part of a forgotten infrastructure, that would change how we see the old world. They would no longer be just military ruins. They would become clues. Clues to a time when geography, architecture, and energy may have been understood together. And that would also explain why so many old systems feel disconnected today. The forts survive, but the context is gone. The maps survive, but the network is missing. The shapes remain, but their original function is debated or forgotten. The result is a landscape filled with objects we can see, but no longer know how to read. So what are star forts really? Officially, they are military architecture. But to alternative historians, they may be something much stranger. Parts of a global system designed around geometry, placement, and possibly energy. Whether you see them as forts or as nodes in a hidden grid, one thing is clear. They do not look accidental. They look intentional, systematic, and maybe connected to a world that understood its own infrastructure far better than we do today. If you want to keep exploring the buried systems, strange architecture, and forgotten networks of the old world, subscribe and join me in the next investigation.